Oh, okay. I am very excited to share this with you. This right here is what we call the 36 tattvas. Tattva means principle of nature, principle of consciousness, principle of the dreaming itself. What we're about to do is pull back the curtain so you can actually see the threads that are weaving together your dreaming specifically, right? Now, this 36 tattvas is what makes Kashmir Shaivism very, very special and really separates it from the other traditions. For these tattvas, what they actually do is they provide you a map of how we descended down into these tiny little bitty limited forms of consciousness. But in that, it also provides a map of the path of expanding back out and regrounding in our embodied self, right? With all of our potential and all of our gifts. What the 36 tattvas share with you is how this is really a dreaming and what it's constructed of, so you know what to be aware of, right? So you get to apply these principles of Shiva and these 3 laws of mind. Because in this, you realize what you want to focus on, what you want to become, and what you want to experience. This map gives you what to be aware of. And in that, you enter that state of Shiva, of being aware, and then how to be the co-participant. And within this frame, you know how to then co-weave within the story that you are in. Now, at first, some of these principles may seem, really big, but again, we're going to shrink these down into very practical methods that you can be able to apply and measure in real time. So for now, enjoy the story. Allow your imagination go. Put yourself into this experience and see how you might begin to perceive these very subtle awarenesses just on your own. Okay. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Great. Okay. So here we have is what we call the 36 tattvas. Now there's a story that in the beginning, there was no life, there was no form, there was nothing, but just the void. And that void is what we call Shiva. Now Shiva isn't just a void though. Shiva is what we call the field of potential, right? All things come from the void, right? So right now there's these words that I am speaking, these sentences are coming through my mouth, but where are they coming from? Where are they actually originating from? If you follow the thought before the thought before the thought, you enter this space. It's a very powerful meditation to do, but you enter the void itself, right? So if you look on here where it says Shiva Shakti, there's this blank page. The blank page itself is what you would call Shiva. Now, Shakti is the principle of creation. It's what we actually really worship and adore in Shaivism, is the principle of Shakti, the feminine element of being able to bring the potential into manifest form. It is the power of the creation. It is the dance. It is the song. It is the story. It is all of creation. So as I have the space where these words are coming from, that is Shiva. Shakti is the expression, the way I am speaking the song, the tones in the voice itself. On that blank page, you can see the blankness is Shiva, but the writing is Shakti, the color is Shakti, the pen is Shakti, even the paper itself is Shakti, because it is manifest form. And so in this picture here, you see Shiva's in the dark. Shiva's in part of the universe, where Shakti is in the light, taking on the form. Now, how this becomes practical in what we are doing, we are going to really hone in on an ability which we call intentional imagination. By being able to go into a neutral kind of state, we go into a potential state from which we can use our intention to manifest and bring things into our physical life, into our relationships, into the story we go. So we're going to be going over this principle and really mastering this, so you can have the ability to intentfully co-create within your dreaming. Okay. Now, coming back to the story, Shiva had this idea, is like, okay, I have this thought, I'm this infinite potential being. What would it be like for me to contract down into these tiny little life forms, these billions of life forms, and have all these billions of different experiences of forgetting who I am and having to take a journey of remembering my true nature of who and what I am. But to do that, Shiva had to contract down into these limited forms and take on this forgetfulness, enter a state of amnesia. And he had to adopt all these different stories that gave him all these different perspectives of remembering who he is, right? So what happens is when Shiva had the thought became Shakti, began to create form. And the form created what is called Maya. And for many cultures, they call it the illusion, right? The veil of life. And in a lot of the dualistic systems, they actually think of Maya in a negative way. But in our tradition, in the tantric tradition with Kashmir Shaivism, we actually lean into Maya. We recognize Maya is the dreaming, the manifestation of Shakti herself. And in fact, we are an extension of that dreaming, right? Now, for something to take form, there has to be something that kind of outlines what that form is. Because the thing is with Shiva is all-knowing. Shiva is everywhere, every place. Shiva is without time. So there has to be something that creates these limitations, these parameters to create form and to create story. And that's what we call the 5 veils of limitations, which we also call the kanchukas. Now these veils, as we now have, because we're in these forms, we have limited time. We have the limited space, right? We will only live where we live. We only live in this one body. For limited time, we only live for so long, right? The seasons are constantly changing. So there's a limited time for each season to be. Limited time within certain stages and cycles of our life, right? Then we also have limited energy. Where like Shiva is all potential energy, we actually have to rest. We could only harness so much energy, utilize it, right? And then we also have limited knowledge, right? We only can know so much. We know that which is in relationship with where we are, with the people we have grown up with our culture, with the times, with what we are focused to learn. Okay? Now there's one last veil, that 5th veil, where it actually puts all of this whole story and dreaming into motion. And that limitation is the sense of feeling incomplete. And because we feel incomplete, we have this desire to fulfill that completeness, to feel that void, to feel complete. But in this sense of incompleteness, we have this insatiability. We're never quite satiated. Therefore, when we go through a journey and we work really hard towards a goal, once we reach that goal, instead of feeling really complete and whole, we immediately are asking, well, what's next? What there in the horizon is beckoning me now to move forward, to fill the next gap inside of me? And we see here that Maya is the beginning of the dreaming. That is the story of all the stories of every book you've ever read, of any movie or show you have ever watched, right? Of any dream that you have ever had, it was based on a specific location with specific people. There's a certain time frame in when that was happening. The people there had knowledge specific to that story that was occurring. And there was some form of incompleteness within that story that instigated and brought that story into existence. So right here is the beginning of the dreaming itself. Okay, and we're going to go into much further detail into these here later. But from Maya, from these veils of limitation, gave birth to what we call Purusha, or the limited soul. Where Shiva is all limitless, now there is the element that we can exist in, that we are cultivating the state of our embodied and awakened state to enter the state of the limited soul of Purusha. Right? Now, because Purusha is there, Purusha gave birth to what is called Prakriti. Prakriti is what we know as nature, the very principles of nature itself. And those three primary principles of nature are what we call the trigunas, which is sattva, rajas, and tamas. Now, these are the principles of nature and also the cyclic movement of nature. For example, tamas is like the state of winter. It's a time of inertia, a time of rest, a time of deep sleep and unawareness. But then there's something that occurs there, a sense of movement, and we begin to move. That restlessness occurs. And so it's like we move from winter into the springtime. And springtime is a time of blossoming and moving. And then we enter a state of sattva. Sattva is a time when we feel balanced, we feel connected, we feel inspired. But just like the summer season of sattva, it begins to contract with the fall. And that contracting, that transition time is what we again call rajas. And with the rajas, we descend back down until we come back into tamas. So suddenly, Purusha gave birth to Prakriti, which is the principles of nature that puts the whole universe into this cyclic movement. You can even call it the breathing, the inhalation and the exhalation of consciousness itself, of the dreaming. And we each have our own unique cycle as with the cycles of nature. Now, Prakriti gave birth to what we call Buddhi. And Buddhi is very, very important here. Buddhi is what we call discernment, the ability to discern differences, similarities, identities, things that are identical. Our ability to discern is what we're going to really focus on, because the discernment is what enables us to be aware of being aware and what to be aware of, and hence how to participate within that. We'll get further into this. Now, Buddhi gave birth to something else. Buddhi gave birth to what we call ahamkara, or the ego, the I consciousness. Right? For there to be discernment, there needs to be an I in order to discern. I can discern myself as separate from you, separate from the birds singing outside my window, from my couch cushion, my laptop. Now there is a sense of separation that occurs, that there is discernment of identifying, right? I can identify with myself. Now, this is very important here, because up till now, we're seeing how nature has gave birth to discernment. Discernment gave birth to the ego, or the I consciousness, right? But we don't have body yet. There isn't form yet. These are just levels of awareness. Now, Ahamkara gives birth to manos, the mind, right? So like here in this picture, you can see the Purusha, right? The limited soul is now being in these veils, embraced within the veils of limited time, knowledge, space, and so forth. You see the elements of energy there, Prakriti, right? Of sattva and rajas and tamas is all within that there. There is the individual consciousness of I am here. And now there is manos, which is the mind, the thoughts, the beliefs, the stories. Now the mind gives birth to the five senses and the five actions, right? Taste, touch, sound, smell, sight, the act of seeing, the act of feeling, the act of tasting, and so on, right? The mind uses the senses and to reach out and connect. And that act of reaching out gave birth to what we call the five elements: earth, water, fire, air or wind, and space. Okay. Now I'm going to plant a little seed here because this gets really fun when you start to get really deep into this, right? We're going to learn all these fun techniques on how to amplify these different awarenesses so we have that discernment so we can rest in our embodied self and know which of these we are actually playing with. Okay, we're going to bring it to a very practical terms. In the meantime, stay with me. This is the construct of the dreaming. Okay, now here's something really fun in this. The senses, right? The sight, everything, they are what give birth to the elements. The elements isn't giving off smell. The elements aren't giving off sight, right? It is the senses which come from the mind. The mind, the senses are part of the mind. The elements are part of the senses, which are part of the mind, right? All of this is just mind. And so as we can see here, you're all part of this greater dreaming, and all cultures speak into how we are all of the same tree. We're all waves of the one sea. So many cultures have a saying just like this, right? And what we see here is how the physical body, right, and the physical world is at the very, very bottom of this map of consciousness. And here we say that these are what we call the 5 koshas, or the 5 subtle bodies. And the densest body, the physical body, is called Annamaya kosha, which means the food sheath, right? But in this, it is shared that the body is still just one expression of mind. The body is an expression of mind. Feel into that. And this is very important because we have an ability to change our bodies, our health, with shifting our mind, shifting with how we are identifying, right? For example, there was a young boy, I think he was about 8 or 10, who had 6 different split personalities, 6 different consciousness. And when one personality was in and he was allergic to orange juice, he would break out into hives. When another personality came in, the hives would disappear. One of his personality had all kinds of warts all over his body. But as soon as that consciousness left and the other personality came in, the warts disappeared. Now, one of my favorite aspects of this was one of his personalities had blue eyes and one of them had brown eyes. So this shares on a very tangible level how much our bodies are just an extension of mind, right? Now, we can see, I'm gonna bring this down for a moment so you guys see my little arrow here, okay? So our body right here is down here. It's just part of the elements. And then the next subtle part of our body is called pranamaya kosha. That's our emotional body. Our emotional body is still part of the elements, right? So our sense of groundedness is with our earth, or our sense of depression is with earth. Water is a sense of fluidity with life, or it can be our emotions where we're feeling depressed or feeling sad or grief can be with water. Our fire gives us the sense of passion and love, motivation, but it can also be anger and jealousy. Air gives us a sense of anxiety and insecurity, right? Space gives us a sense of being spacey, ungrounded, and so forth. But our emotions are still here within the pranamaya body. And again, the physical and the pranamaya are still just layers of mind. But then we enter that next layer, which is the mental body, which is where our stories are, our beliefs, our thoughts, right? Consider, like, with what thoughts do you think over and over and over again? Like, we normally kind of have a common dialogue that we go through during the day. With what intensity are you thinking them? What story are you associating with those thoughts, right? So with that, we see how those stories and that mind often hijacks of our awareness, and we get associated in these limited stories. We associate with a limited self. And in that, we end up going through the motions of life where life is more happening to us and we're not really participating in a very conscious way. But when we can move here where it says wisdom body, which we normally call the buddhi body, the body of discernment, suddenly we move from the mind below ahamkara, ego. We move beyond the ego, the I consciousness, and we enter into discernment. Now, once we are here in the state of discernment, we have the ability to recognize differences and similarities. We have the ability to say, oh, this emotion is with the earth element, or this is with the fire element. Or you can say, oh, I see where these veils of limitation are at play in my life. I can see these structures in my dreaming. I can see the story I'm in. Right here with buddhi is where you take back a level of sovereignty with how to participate within your story and be stewarded by it and to help steward it. So much of what we are doing is learning and these skills to break free from these lower associated states, recognizing all this is still just Shakti. It's all part of the dreaming. But now once we enter buddhi, we become awake inside of the dreaming itself. And when we go there, we enter Anandamaya Kosha, which means the bliss body, which is going above sattva, rajas, and tamas, prakriti, and that is grounding us right here in Purusha, right? So what we are doing here is we are learning to disassociate from these sleeping states and these stories of limitation, and we are learning to apply these 3 laws of mind, what to focus on what you want to become. So you experience where we are identifying with ourself in Purusha. As Baba would say, there's nothing to attain, for the self is already attained. Meditate on yourself, love yourself, honor yourself, for God dwells within you as you. So we are learning how to retrain our mind. We're reclaiming it through these 3 laws of mind. So we enter Purusha. And then we can apply these principles of Shiva, of being aware of being aware, being co-participant and co-creator. Now, another way of looking at this, same picture, but right here, the drawing, right here in the middle is the elements right here. This is the physical body, the emotional body, all the senses right here is the mind. See what you see, this is a level of contraction, and we are expanding out of that into buddhi discernment and up here into Purusha, where we're in the bliss body. Okay. Om. So in that, you can see the universe is just pretending to be individuals. All these different Shivas. We always sing, I am Shiva, you are Shiva, all are Shiva. And in that, we can start to see life as all these amazing stories and all these amazing experiences living out, rather than taking it personal and going like, what's going on? Instead, we see all of life is having a unique experience through these contraction of these elements and these principles. We are all manifesting in these varying different kind of forms. We each come in with unique properties of these elements, which we call the doshas, combination of the elements. And in these unique combination gives us our personality. It gives us our unique perceptions of life. And we come into this world with a particular karma. And that karma gives us a certain imprint, which is also that part of that incompleteness, which puts our story and motivation into life. And hence, you can see as we contract down into these limited forms and we go on the path of remembering, we are each walking a unique path in this life. And in that, we can surrender closer in to what path we are walking. We can be of greater acceptance to the path that others are walking, recognizing we're all on this path of remembering ourselves home. And what's more is that it's just not a path, but that we are each living out a story. We are in a lived story. And the thing is with, a lot of cultures or a lot of traditions, get out of your story, you're not your story. But what we want to do is We want to get rid of all the stories that we could call by any other name. And we want to come and get claimed by the one story that we belong to. For again, only you are going to meet the people in your life that you meet when the time you do. Only you are going to have the certain experiences that invite you to ask specific questions, to grow and discover hidden strengths within you. You are living out a very particular story. And when you know that story that you are in, right, suddenly you can apply these principles of Shiva, apply the principles of mind. You're like, great, I'm aware of being aware in this story. I know how to be co-participant. I see the veils of limitation right here structuring it and how they're inviting me to ask these questions and to expand beyond my edges here. You can now be a co-participant in the story itself. And in this, you see how we are all these infinite forms of Shiva, going through these storied lives of remembering ourselves and what we're truly capable of. So in this, you can see there is this pathway of a descent of these expanded state all the way down into these contracted elements. But it also reveals this path of ascension. And that the path of ascension is first and foremost recognizing that everything is consciousness. Everything is Shakti. Where there are many traditions that say neti, neti, not this, not this. We say, oh, no, no. This is actually an extension of myself. This is a part of my dreaming. And we can play with it and shapeshift it by shifting our thoughts, by applying these principles of the mind, what we want to focus on, right? Because think about it, when you go to sleep at night and you're in a dream, right? Whatever you're focusing on your dream is shape-shifting in accordance to what you get pulled into and associate with. Likewise, you are now coming awake inside of a dream that you are in your everyday life. And you get to choose what to focus on and associate with in order to direct the dreaming and the stories, the relationships, the opportunities. And so you're co-weaving with the experience in the story that you are in. Oh, so you can see this is a very rich share. There's a lot to explore. I hope you go through this again and again and again. And we are going to do various practices to help create the discernment to really discern. It's like, oh, here's the earth element. Here's the veils of limitation. Here's Purusha. When do we collapse? The trigunas, right? Rajas, Sattva, Tamas. And so now you get to feel the full play and the movement of the dreaming. Now we get to cultivate and come into these very simple, practical ways of amplifying these awarenesses so you can be a conscious participant within your dreaming. I love it. Okay, I look forward to our next sessions and bringing this into very practical forms of application. Oh.